Oops, gotta take myself. Ah. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Elise Chenier, and I am the director of the Archives of Lesbian Oral Testimony. And I am broadcasting from my office at Simon Fraser University, which is on the beautiful, unceded, and traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. I'm so glad you've joined us here at our new time, 12 noon. I thought I would switch us to right at the lunch hour in the hopes that at least those of you in this time zone would prepare yourself a lovely meal and sit down with us and enjoy your lunch while you got a little bit of lesbian history, because who doesn't want that? And on that note, there's a new Facebook group. Well, I don't know if that it's new, but somebody connected me to it called, it's like Butch's Cooking or something. And it's wonderful photos of Butch's cooking during the lockdown or the shelter in place moment. And I meant to post a picture of that. And anyways, I'll share the link next week because it's certainly fun to look at, and some tasty food as well. Okay, so as those of you who've been with us before know, first I wanted to say, please let us know, for those of you who are watching, please let us know that you're there and where you're watching from. I see we have with us Marg Yo, who is a poet, an outstanding poet, and was a guest on Lesbians Live last fall. And she's here in the Lower Mainland. And I see that Pat Hogan is here too, also in the exhibit, and will be a future guest, and also lives here on the Lower Mainland. So anybody else tuning in, please, in the comments on Facebook or YouTube. I guess it's not great because I know on YouTube you have to have an account, and otherwise it doesn't. I don't think it lets you, so it's not great. But if you can, and if you can't, shoot me an email because I like to know. It's important to know I'm reaching you and who you are. So I'm really excited. This week, our guest is Cyndia Cole. So, I was going to say, what I'm doing weekly is bringing to you an exhibit that is set up right now at the City of Vancouver Archives, which of course is closed. And so it closed right after our planned opening reception, which ended up getting canceled, on March 8th, International Women's Day. So I decided, since you can't come to it, I would bring it to you. And so what you see on the screen there, I don't know, is it your right, is it your left? I'm not sure, is the banner of featuring Cyndia Cole, who I'm going to bring on in just a moment. And actually, her banner, hi, Cam. Cam is watching from the top of Burnaby Mountain, not far from here, actually. Hi to you. Thanks for joining us. So Cyndia's banner actually appears first in the whole exhibit, and why that is because what I actually did is arrange them so that the quote at the top kind of told a story. So if you just read the quote at the top, it would tell us a story. And as you can see there, the quote is, "We were just ordinary women who wanted to change our lives. We believed we could, and we did. You can too." And I really wanted this quote to start us off because one of the things that I've noticed as a teacher, and so the reason why I do this project and the way I've oriented a lot of my teaching is toward making a connection with the younger generation. So students I'm teaching now are in their late teens and early 20s, mostly, not exclusively, but mostly, who often feel very disempowered, unable to make change. So I do a lot of work to try and connect young people with our elders, people who've been around the block a couple times, and to help facilitate that sense of capacity, the ability to do things. So this was a great quote to kick that off, because it kind of represents what I'm trying to do in all of my work. So my scholarly work, as well as my teaching. All right, so I am going to bring, oh dear, hold on a minute. Why is just a minute, Cynthia? Now you're coming through on my Skype, but for some reason, ah, the Skype is not showing on this on my. Hold on a minute. Oh darn it! Usually there's a little window at the bottom, and you show up, but you're not showing up. What have I done wrong? Just when you think you got it all figured out.
On my screen, I'm in a little window up at the top.
I know, but you're. I don't know if see, it's the sound is coming through
Mm-hmm.
this program, but I can't. Hold on, let me see if I click on that. You're coming to me on Skype, which
Yes.
is a separate program from how I'm broadcasting. And normally there's a little window at the bottom, and let me just see what this does. Oh, there. Okay, so to those of you out there who are watching, let me know if you can see Cindy. I think you can see Cynthia. If somebody text Marg, Pat, you can text. I can see that you're able to text. So let me know if you can see Cynthia. That's so. I don't know why that wasn't coming. Anyways, here we are. Welcome. This is awesome, says Laurie. Yes, great. So Laurie was the one who originally interviewed Cynthia. Is that right? Have I got it right? No. Oh, sorry. Pardon me. But you did. You are.
Kirsty. Kirsty
Oh,
is the person.
Kirsty did. But you are connected now to each other through a different.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
We have a very close relationship, Letty and I.
Yeah, yeah. That's why because I know I've seen Facebook pictures of the two of you together. Anyways, okay. So welcome, Cynthia. Thank you so much. Cynthia has a very special place in my heart, I should say, because she hand makes these absolutely gorgeous cards. And I have been the lucky recipient of I think a few of them. And most recently at the opening of the exhibit. So thank you so much for everything you do. Now you had actually prepared a few words that you wanted to say at the opening of the exhibit, but since we were not able to do that, I thought, why not now? So would you like to get started by sharing those words with us?
Absolutely. Thank you. I feel so honored and privileged and excited to be talking with you in this way. Thank you so much for inviting me. And when I was thinking about the exhibit, I thought, you know, even I didn't, when I was younger, I did not have the ability to imagine the limits, restrictions, or difficulties of my mother or my grandmother, the feminists who fought for the right to vote, because the things that they had won, I just took for granted. And I thought, I have to set the context for, what the limitations on being a woman were in my younger years, for people to understand the energy behind us becoming feminists and lesbian feminists in the 70s and 80s. So here's how it goes. Dear young folks, 52 years ago, when I was 18 years old in 1968, despite my settler, white-skinned, middle-class, born in the USA privilege, because I was a woman, I could not attend Princeton University, although I was qualified in all other ways. I could not pursue studies and a career in science, technology, engineering, or math, even though I loved and excelled in these subjects. Because I was a woman, I could not wear comfortable clothing that allowed freedom of movement to school or to work, to church, or to parties. I could not travel alone with the expectation of safety on planes, trains, subways, buses, bicycles, or on foot, especially to unknown places or at night. Because I was a woman, I could not ask anyone out on a date or even for a dance. I could not rebuff sexual attention from any male without being ridiculed as frigid. I could not accept sexual attention from any male without being shamed as a whore. As a woman, I could not expect to have the knowledge, means, or social medical support to experience any aspect of my sexuality with consent, pleasure, respect, or safety, and without force, unwanted pregnancy, STDs, condemnation, ostracism, and guilt. I certainly could not raise a child alone or with another woman. 50 years ago, when I was 20 years old, in 1970, I ran away to Canada with a man I was advised to marry to help him stay alive and out of prison, and I did. He was a war resister. As a married woman, I tried to keep my maiden name, but did not succeed. Because I was married and a woman, it was very unlikely that I could ever get the same work as a man, let alone a career or profession. But if I did, I could never expect to be paid the same as that man. I could not expect to ever have a woman boss or to be the boss of male employees. Because I was a married woman, I could not be considered on my own merits. I could not apply for a job, student visa, or land immigrant status unless my husband got these first on his own merits. I could not sign a lease or get a loan or a mortgage unless my husband signed for it. As a married woman, I could not get a divorce unless I proved my husband guilty of some very serious wrongdoing, even if he also wanted a divorce. And if he didn't want the divorce, I would be crucified for my wrongdoings, real or imagined, and he would emerge blameless. 44 years ago, when I was 26 years old in 1976, because I was a woman, I could not kiss a woman without knowing that I might lose my job, my apartment, and my entire network of social support, including family, friends, neighbors, academic mentors, and even heterosexual feminists. If I displayed any affection towards a woman, if I looked like a lesbian, or if I simply seemed unresponsive or angry towards sexual attention from men in any public place, I might lose my physical safety. As a lesbian feminist woman, I could not expect support or solidarity from other women when I spoke out about anything, especially about experiences of sexual abuse, harassment, or rape. Though when I did receive their support, it changed everything. Because I was a woman who loved another woman, I could not begin to imagine my reality today at the age of 70 in 2020. We have a 26-year partnership, and International Women's Day 2020 is the 9th anniversary of our love being legally recognized. We've constructed a magnificent home, which we share with chosen family. We're embraced by all of our biological family members and welcomed by our multicultural neighbors. We've survived suspicion and harassment at work and are retiring from honored careers in elder care, mental health, and addictions. For years, we gave our hearts and souls to supporting our brothers with AIDS. We are faith leaders who co-founded a pride group for SGI Buddhists 25 years ago. We live rich, authentic lives, contributing to our queer and quirky communities. We've found our voices through stories, poetry, and humor. We mentor familial, queer, and Buddhist youths. Because we're women, women together, we've made lives worth living, lives of happiness. Everything we risked and challenged and fought for was worth it. We were ordinary women who wanted to change our lives. We believed we could, and we did. So can you.
That's really wonderful, Cynthia. Thank you so much. I'm really glad you had the chance to share that. I'd like to invite people who are listening in to, if you're able, in the comments, either on Facebook or YouTube, um, send us your response to the piece that Cynthia just read. I That would be wonderful to share with my students. It's really, I think, it's so difficult to capture the extraordinary limitations on women in the 1970s. It really is. I was watching the first episode of Mrs. America, the new show that features Phyllis Schlafly. It centers her character and the tensions between her and the women's movement. And it just, there's a moment where she says to her husband, just sign the credit card application, would you? So I know they're choosing that, trying to subtly like signal to people, just, here's this incredibly intelligent, powerful woman who still needs her husband to sign her damn credit card application. I just want to read you, Janny Mack says, that was great, Cynthia. And Andrea says, loved it. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you. Yeah, thank you everybody for your comments, and keep them coming in, because we like to have a conversation. We're trying to reproduce that as much as we can in this forum. So you set us up really beautifully to talk about. I wanted to ask you about your experience coming out. I think as part of, the context for the 1970s is the way in which women were really raised to expect to marry and have children. And there really weren't other options. There was such stigma attached to women who didn't. You were a failure or a deviant in some fashion. And so making that choice, people, because of quote unquote sexual liberation and the sort of civil rights movement and that moment, I think people wrongly think the 70s was this period of openness. But in fact, there was still this extraordinary pressure, and I think probably still today, but even more so then. So can you tell us a little bit about what that process of, what was your relationship to your own body and your own sexuality when you were a young adult? And then what was that like for you to come into a same-sex attraction and lesbian identity eventually?
It is a little bit hard to speak about, but I would say that in retrospect, I was very fortunate to be deep in denial throughout my teenage and high school years. When I listened to the stories of women of my same age who were more aware of their romantic and sexual attraction to women, if they had a much bigger internal struggle about whether to act on it or not, and the consequences of acting on it were often very, very, very serious. In my case, I had very intense friendships with women, and I just thought that's what friendships were. And I did not explicitly experience them as sexual or romantic. But looking back, I can tell you the two girls in high school I was in love with. And maybe there were people around me who felt funny about that. But, but there was this context, that, going back to what you said, in which you could, women were supposed to marry and have children. And that was the path that my mother lived. She got married at 18. She had 4 children. She was a wonderful woman, but I did not want that path. And the only other path was to be a career woman, and which you might study something, or you might, have some sort of job. And that absolutely appealed to me among those alternatives, but it was painted as a life of tremendous loneliness in which you were rejected. You had no sexual or romantic life whatsoever. You wore ugly fashions. You didn't have any friends. And nobody, loved you because there was no husband and no children. Nobody supported or helped you. It was just a lonely, lonely life, right? And and I kind of knew I didn't want to live a lonely life. But so then in 1968, I went to an alternative college that I approached because it was a place where it was away from my family. It was a place full of new and different ideas, and the sexual revolution, which include free love. You should just be free to love anybody. You didn't have to get married. You could just be happy. You could play around. You didn't have to be committed and wait for the big diamond ring and like that. And I thought, well, that's like sounds better to me. And I did have relationships with boys or men. I don't know what you'd call them at a young age at the time. But really, what I was trying to do was I was trying to become the author of my own life. I was trying to be aware of my own sexual feelings, like from the inside. When I read the women's liberation pamphlet called The Myth of the Vaginal Orgasm in 1968 or 69, that sort of said women had the right to have orgasms, I thought, okay, good, let's figure out what that's all about. Anyway, but at the same time, I became wrapped up in the politics of social justice, which I felt very, very deeply. I was slightly aware of the injustice I experienced as a woman, but I was much more aware of the injustice that racialized people had been enslaved. I mean, racism just was the entire fabric of American society that I lived in. And I was, all of my awareness, came about kind of through the civil rights movement and grappling with the nonviolent philosophy of Martin Luther King. So by the time I was 18, I was involved in an actual civil rights action. And a man that I met through this action, who was white, but who was more politically experienced than anyone I knew, became, my close friend and confidant. And he is the man that I came to Canada with and got married to. And, I never, in retrospect, the strength of our relationship was a comradeship in which we had similar principles. And we were willing to put our lives on the line for them. And quite literally we did. We faced situations which certainly might have gotten him killed, as I mentioned. So, I had a deep affection for him, but I didn't recognize at the time that I was going through that isn't what love is. That isn't what romance. That isn't. But I would say that what I learned when I came out, realizing that finally I wanted to kiss a woman who was a friend of mine in 1976. So I was 26 at the time, and I'd already been married and split up. I did not split up because I was coming out. I split up before that. Was that it wasn't just, as I said in that preview, that I could love a woman, but actually I think more revolutionary for me was to realize that I could allow a woman to love me in a way that I could not allow any man to love me, because I could trust that I was being loved for myself, accepted for who I am, and just emotionally really safe. Yeah, that's my coming out story in a way, is to not just live the life of the mind, not just live the life of social justice politics, but live the life of the heart. That's my coming out story.
That's extraordinary. I've never heard it put that way, but it makes perfect sense to me, what you've just said. I feel like I just want to sit with that for a little while. It's really, yeah, that's really something to think about.
Well, may I at this point, although I was going to do this later,
Yeah.
may I at this point read the love poem that tries to encapsulate just a tiny bit of that?
Yeah, please do.
We'll afterwards we'll promote it in this new book here, but this is a rather recent poem by me, but in a way it is still the surprise of that I could be who I am and live the life that I live. There's a phrase in it that I say which is Sturm und Drang. It's a German phrase. It means storm and clouds, literally, and it refers to an artistic movement that is about the expression of very extreme emotions. Okay, it's called Who Knew? Who knew a person like me, born wrong, cursed as too independent and strong-willed, would finally come to love? Not roller coaster love, with thrills before the crash, but love that lasts, love that's home, love that just is, everyday, ordinary, and unbelievable. Who knew all that Sturm und Drang before you would teach me what love is not, and then lead me through my true self and the cosmos of my heart to reach you across the universe and at the water cooler, now 25 years and more. Who knew?
It kind of reminds me of Rumi. There's a bit of Rumi in that. That's really extraordinary. I wanted to share with you. I'm not the only one who thinks so. So Marcy Newman wrote earlier when you were talking about your own experience. I really felt moved to hear this. I'm a few years younger, but never knew these experiences were happening to lesbians at that time. It brings a lot of light. And Andrea wrote. I'll try to pronounce her last name. Like Pajarova, I think. It's so beautiful. She wrote, "Living." Well, I put her name up here. Living what you are feeling. Yeah, yeah. That is really beautiful. Thank you so much. Um, yeah. So writing has been. I guess I'm just going to go off with our little. You've thrown us off our plan. I'm just going to follow what you're doing here. And writing's been really important to you as a mode of expression. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it's meant to you and what it has allowed you to do?
Okay. Well, I guess, at the beginning, I came to writing as a kind of through the academic route, right? That when I became a feminist, I was electrified by reading articles that other feminists wrote that had an entirely different perspective on what's going on for us as women, what we should expect, what we want, what we can do. And I thought, yeah, those words of theirs changed me and helped me to find, a shared experience, right? And in my struggle to create women's studies together with others at SFU, it was a struggle to read and learn about other women. What have they lived through? What do they think? What have they done? In a way that was just not accessible to us. Like we just did not have women's perspective on anything. That during the time I was studying as an undergraduate in sociology and anthropology, even in that subject, which was not considered so profoundly male, I was the only person in 5 seminars in 3rd and 4th year, in which talk about mansplaining, that's all they could do. There were just men there. They were just talking to each other. I was the only woman, like if I spoke, would anybody listen, and would anybody comment? Would anybody speak to my reality? Not so much. So, in a separate world, I was meeting with Maggie Benston and other feminists in which we were talking about what we wanted to learn, what we wanted to know, what we wanted to study. And, that led me to realizing, especially when I came out as a lesbian, that, what is our voice? What is our, not our relationship to ourselves and our relationship to each other as women. It's like we have to go back to the beginning just to discover that. And, as my life has progressed and I've become a Buddhist, I think self-reflection is the source of change, right? To see things, to see ourselves differently, allows us to act differently. And that is where we can change things from, right? So the process of journal writing was very significant for me in that. I was in graduate school at this point at UBC, and facing flunking out, which was so shocking to me because I'd always been an A student, because I couldn't find anything to write about until I got permission from women around me who were not academics to begin keeping a journal and writing about myself. And looking at how profoundly I tried to write in the voice that was not my own voice. That to be believed, to be credible, to have any place in that academic world at that time, you had to be objective, professional, disengaged, like if I was writing about women, they had to be like specimens I was observing, and I challenged that with what became my master's thesis. And it was really about who has the right to speak, what makes something believable, who is given voice. Ever since I've done that work, which is called Sociology of Knowledge, I've been profoundly aware of the power of being the author, and have worked at that in a literal sense in terms of writing, but also in the more general sense of being the author of my life, to be the one who is writing the story of my life, instead of, the world I was handed is we didn't have a story of our own lives. We were the reflection. We were the mirror in which our father, brother, husband, boss were going to be reflected. And we would just say, oh, you hero, you just, go on and do that. And then I'll just bask in this reflected status that I'm connected to some man who's successful. It's like we didn't even have our own stories at that point. Well, once we started telling our stories, the real stories, everything started to change. And there was, nobody could believe that these were, really our stories. And lots of them were stories of pain and trauma. But more and more they've become the stories of who we want to be, who we want to be, and what it's like being it.
Oh, there's so much I could say in response to that. I mean, two things. First, I want to recommend to everybody the book Heartberries. I don't know if you've read it. It's an incredible memoir, and who we want to be in pain and trauma. I mean, it's really extraordinary. It was, I think it came out 1 year ago or maybe two, and there was a lot of buzz around it, so people may have heard of it. It's Therese, and her last name is, I don't know if you pronounce it Mailhot, but it's Mailhot. It's really an extraordinary piece of writing, but also, I've been thinking a lot, and this doesn't have anything to do with being lesbian, but it has to do with being yourself and learning. I just read about my students' journal entries. So we were doing a course on murdered and missing Indigenous women. And I've never made journaling a requirement. I'm a historian, so we tend not to do that kind of thing. but I wanted to make sure that they were taking time to process the really difficult material that we were working with, and not just sort of leaving class and moving on to the next thing, as our very busy schedules often demand that we do, but wanted to make sure they were taking time to just sort of process it and reflect on it. And the writing, that kind of writing is just always so much powerful. Like, I always feel like I get to know my students so much better when I read that, and it's often very good writing. And I think a lot about, I do think there's value in the essay, but I don't know that I'm getting to know them, and I don't know that they're actually getting to know themselves in doing it. So just something but your words right now come to me at a moment where, yeah, I'm really thinking about the value of that, and what is education for? Like, what are we here for? And I used to think it was about mastery of the discipline, but I'm less committed to that, and I'm much more interested in student growth, like their own growing into themselves. And a lot of teachers have this kind of overriding idea that students are lazy and will cheat and try and get away with stuff, but that's not what I see at all. I see students really struggling to know who they are, to have confidence. Part of that is probably got to do with the institution that I teach at, the kind of students that come here. But I also think that both the beauty and the agony of being a young person today is grossly misunderstood by adults. But anyways, so you do a lot of work though you do connect with youth, and that's really important. So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, one of the focusing specifically on being queer, because one of the things that people have always felt, it's not a new thing, that because we don't come from queer families, right? We have to create these chosen families. They tend to be unigenerational. I don't know. It's very hard to meet people and interact with people outside of your own generational cohort. And so that's, you and I both are really committed to building those bridges. So tell me a little bit about how that's been for you and what that means to you to do that.
Right. Well, it's true. I don't have children of my own, and no grandchildren. And on the side of my brothers and sisters, they have no children. So I don't even have nieces and nephews related to them. My partner comes from a family of 9, and most of the rest of them have children. So actually now I have many, many nieces and nephews, none of whom seem, as far as I know, to be queer. But I think one of my great fortunes is now for 39 years I've been practicing Buddhism, and through that community, I have had an increasing opportunity to become like family to the younger generations. And as my partner and I, as co-founders of a pride group, like within our Buddhist group, have always felt it was our mission to be sure that we could connect to anyone who joined our community who was queer, or even just connected to someone who was queer. So now we have friends who are the parents or foster parents of people who are queer, and now those younger people are part of what we do together. So I learned so much from them. I'll just give one little example. Once, a few years ago, we were having a discussion in the Pride group about marriage. And it turned to how we felt about the availability of legal marriage. And everyone over a certain age, we'll say kind of like at the time, 35, thought, who cares about getting legally married? Either I've got a great partner and that's good enough, or I don't, and that's okay too. But if I found one, I would not. Who cares? And everybody under 35 was like, of course I'm going to get married. And I thought, wow, I have to learn about the shift in perspective that has become possible for young queers growing up in imagining that possibility for themselves, and what it means to be married legally was just really different for us depending on our different ages. So, I love young people because they teach me how to see the world through their eyes, differently than my own. But I think we share in common a goal that, it's still the struggle to be what we call your true self, and to bring that out. The philosophy I follow understands human diversity as exactly parallel to biodiversity. It's natural, and it makes the world stronger and more wonderful. But when something is a very small plant or tree, you don't really know what kind of tree it is. And it isn't that isn't already there, but it has to emerge, it has to blossom, it has to grow. So we have to foster our own growth and the growth of others around us. And honestly, I'm a gardener too. There's nothing more exciting than watching young people grow. What is the purpose of education is what I was thinking when you were speaking about that. The purpose of education from our perspective is what we call creating value. Creating value is just the process by which people become happy. We live better lives when we learn more about ourselves and others, or about the natural world, or whatever field we specialize in. Knowledge by itself doesn't make us happy, but when we incorporate knowledge in such a way that we gain wisdom from it, we can live better lives. Everybody wants to live a better life, to become a more wonderful human being. And to me, I've always loved learning because I saw it as a route in that direction. And I've always loved teaching because I felt that I don't really know something until I share it with others. That's part of what I like about writing, is once I've put something into words, I can share it with others. And then when they reflect back to me their response to that, then they've shared their I write my stories so that I can hear your stories.
Yeah, that's I could talk to you all day about this. It's just really it's great. But if people want to hear more of Cynthia's story, they can go to the exhibit webpage. What I thought I would do, so everybody who joined this call is still here, Cynthia, so that's great. Initially, I was like, I'll try and keep it to half an hour, 40 minutes, because people, it's hard to pay attention and stare at a screen. We're all staring at a screen all the time. But this conversation is not, everybody's still with us. So what I'm going to do is invite you to read Firm.
Okay.
But before you do, just in case people go away, I just want to say my little things, which is, if you I'm gonna keep this going for a little while longer. This Saturday lunchtime, so we've changed our time to noon. You can subscribe. You can if you like the Archives of Lesbian Oral Testimony Facebook page, it'll pop up. And I guess you'll get notifications. Sorry, I'm still trying to figure all this stuff out. You can subscribe. We have our own YouTube page, and some of you are watching us from there, so you can subscribe. And then I also send out an email once a week. So you can email me at echenier@sfu.ca, and I will add you to our email list so you can put it in your calendar. But you can just put it in your calendar right now. So there's way too many ways to know about this. But I hope you come back next week when we are having a conversation with Nancy Pollock. And I also wanted to say before, as a final thing, that this is the anniversary of the abortion caravan, which hugely historically important in Canada, hugely. And it's the 50th anniversary this month, I think. And there's a new book out. And I will be doing an interview in a month with the author of that book. But she is also doing, if you Google Abortion Caravan and, I'm going to blank on her name, but it'll come to me in a second. Second Story Press. Then you can find out all these other live things she's doing. And I really encourage you to check that out if you enjoy learning about feminist history. A lot of lesbians were involved in that movement, so it was a feminist issue. And this whole exhibit is really interested in and trying to actually raise awareness. The whole idea behind creating the exhibit was to help people understand why lesbians were more involved in the women's movement than in the gay rights movement. And because I still don't think there's enough awareness of that. And so that's really my commitment here with this particular project. Okay. So, and there's just so many things going on. It's very exciting. Oh, and I did want to ask one question of people too. So look, even now, 3 new people have joined here. I'm thinking we're gonna have people join. Okay. I'm going to ask, so stay with us because Cindy is going to read a piece before we go. But I did want to ask one question of people. So I've been thinking that, the idea for this show was to bring the exhibit to folks. But, a couple things have come up on my feed lately. So, for example, last week we talked about the shootings in Nova Scotia and violence against women. And Nancy Porteous is a lesbian who has been working in the anti-violence movement for years. So I thought, well, why not interview her? And then there's a new study out by a colleague of mine. She's a co-author, Cindy Holmes, on suicide amongst LGBTQ people. So, I'm aware of a lot of this stuff that's going on and new scholarship coming out. So if you're interested in me also having on people to talk about contemporary issues, but with queer scholars, queer activists, so it's more contemporary. If people are interested in me expanding this out to add that in a little bit, can you write in the comments and let me know? Because, I'm here to serve you. So yeah, I'm happy to do that if people are interested in that. But otherwise, we can just keep it to this kind of oral history thing, which originally was the idea behind it. So that's the stuff I want to share with you today. And Cindy, I'm so grateful for you being here, and you have one last piece of writing to share with us. So I'm going to tuck in, curl up, and get ready for the story.
Okay. So promoting this book, basically Queer, an intergenerational introduction to LGBTQA2S plus lives. In this, I have this short story, which is about, moving to the Commercial Drive area in 1976, at a time when it was kind of known as Little Italy, but actually it was a multi-ethnic place. But there were a lot of coffee bars that were, each one had its specific subset of Italian immigrant men only who frequented them. And we were, us lesbian feminists, we were moving into the neighborhood because we could afford the places there, and we liked the multi-ethnic nature of it, but we were kind of fighting for space. It was the summer I moved there was the summer that Britannia Community Center opened, 1976. Okay, and this is set in 1977. It's called Firm. I'm feeling my muscles in such a new way. I love the cuts becoming visible along my slender biceps and triceps. I ripped off the sleeves of this little blue t-shirt just to show them off. In the summer of 1977, Ginger, Frankie, Abby, and I are the only women who pump iron at Britannia Gym in Vancouver. I'm proud that I move the weights like a woman without clanging them or grunting like guys do. When we finish, we cool off by swimming lengths in the pool, which is so fluid and easy for me. Then we luxuriate naked in the women's sauna, embodying comfort in the flesh. As I walk, I show off my thighs and calves in white shorts and Birkenstocks. In 1967, I was hemmed in by fishnet stockings mini dresses, and cute little bras. One boyfriend praised me as demure. Now I'm bursting into a confident stride, thrilled that my strength is coming out. My stomach rumbles, in a hurry for the picnic after so much exertion. The day is gloriously warm as I walk through my unpretentious immigrant neighborhood. I pass the shops and eateries from everywhere along Commercial Drive, and then I turn onto Kitchener, noticing the older homes as I head towards shady Victoria Park. I walk right past one of the Italian espresso bars. This one lacks any sign or name. I'd love a hazelnut gelato, but my body doesn't need the constriction I'd feel warding off the penetrating stares. I won't make the mistake again of invading this space invisibly marked off for Sicilian men only. I'm supposed to know, without any sign, that they don't want the likes of me or my money. They don't want anyone but paisanos. On this territory, their evil eye is a weapon to protect them and their mafia money. I'm halfway down the block and in sight of the park when two young men exit the no-name espresso bar. They strut and swagger as they overtake and pass me. Once I see their backs, one leans to the other and spits with guttural vehemence. Faggot! I'm surprised my shoulders don't hunch. I don't brace or pull myself inward. They don't even look back. They're retreating, not approaching. It's midday, and I'm only a block from home. This is my turf. I stop myself from a guffaw. Do they actually think I'm a man? Or are they just so ignorant they don't know the word? I am a lesbian. And like the giant graffiti behind me says, this is Amazon land. Basically. Actually started by Chris Morrissey, and Claire Robson became hired as the paid coordinator. And that's for many years.
I had myself on mute. Thank you, Pat. Um, right. Okay. What was I saying? I was saying those two books are by that she. Yeah, that you were holding up. Thank you. Are published collections by Quirky. Really important collective here in Vancouver. Yeah. So thank you so much. And yeah, saying the there's a bit of a delay. Yeah, you can hear me now. There's a bit of a delay between people's comments and me talking because anyways, I really see I love that everybody's letting me know. See, that's the thing. I muted myself so that there was no noise while you were reading, and then I forget to unmute. It's there's a lot of technology happening, and it's hard for one person to like. As somebody said to me, you're the promoter, the communications officer, producer, director, host, and like tech person. I'm like, yeah, that's true. Actually, it is kind of hard to do all those things, but it's super fun. And this technology is actually, I mean, it's pretty cool that I can at least try, right? And everybody out there is so patient with me, so I appreciate that. Um, and that brings us to the end of lunch hour today on this May 2nd. Happy belated May Day to everybody. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Wonderful to have you here. Wonderful to see everybody. And everybody who came, I want you all to come back next week. And I want you all to invite one friend, tell them to come along, especially younger people. That's who we want to reach out to. So tell them what we're doing, invite them to drop in, share their comments, and we'll spread the love. Thanks, yeah, that's right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day. Aw, thanks.
Bye, and thank you so much.
Zed,
It's been wonderful.
thank you, Cindy. You stay on and we'll have a little chat while I end this thing up. And thank you, Zed, and thank you, Marcy and Marg and everybody else. Yeah, Iris, thank you so much. Bye bye.